All right. Welcome back to If Duck Can Do It podcast, where we inspire others to follow their interests and define what being a self starter means for them. We are on episode 5, where we are inviting Lena Vani, an actor, producer, and entrepreneur, onto the show. And I would love to give Lena a very warm welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. The pleasure is mine and ours. So let's start off by asking you to tell our guests a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name's Lena, and I was born and raised on the west side of the state of Massachusetts in a place called the Pioneer Valley, and I lived there my whole life until I eventually moved to Puerto Rico when I was 21 years old, and I've been back and forth between those two places since then.
Amazing. And you're coming to us live from Puerto Rico right now, right?
I am. Yep.
Amazing.
I am. Yes, I'm in Naguabo, Puerto Rico, which is on the East Coast.
Incredible. And we have some little froggy guests with us today, right?
Yes, we do. That is the coqui, the unofficial but basically official national symbol of Puerto Rico.
Amazing. We're happy to have them on the show too. All right. And so we're really excited to have you here. And two of the reasons why we have invited you on the show is to talk about your experience with filmmaking and with entrepreneurship. And you do a lot more than that. I want to just say that right now. You also act, you model, and just so much more. You're so impressive. But today we're going to narrow down all those impressive feats and just focus on your filmmaking, specifically producing, as well as your hospitality business. So if we can start off by asking, why film and why the hospitality business? What kind of drew you to these fields and what do they mean to you?
Great. So, why film? I was a theater major in college. I concentrated in acting, sound design, and costume construction. And then COVID happened, and theater was non-existent anymore because large groups were not allowed. So after 7 months or so of that, I just started thinking, how can I get back into my artistic energy that I need to exist in a lot of the time without putting on a play? And, the clear, direct step from that is film. It's much more manageable. You can create stuff with few resources and fewer amounts of people. So that's how that one got started. The hospitality business, goodness, that came about. I worked as a cleaner for extra money while in college, so I had experience. And then I came to Puerto Rico for the first time in 2017, and I just absolutely fell in love with the island. I feel like I'm a person who has been to a lot of different kinds of places, and my heart just never felt so drawn to be connected to another place other than the place where I'm from in Massachusetts before. I'd never felt inclined to put any kind of roots in any other location, and so I decided to listen to that, and I found something that's called a workaway in Puerto Rico, where you work in exchange for room and board. And so I did a workaway for a while, and then eventually I got a job as a live-in cleaner for a guest house, and then I just fell into it in that regard.
Amazing. And what was the first guest house name that you worked at?
The very first guest house name that I worked at was Dancing Tortugas in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, on the west side. It's no longer a guest house slash hostel. They closed in, I think, 2019. But the owner of that property is still doing some rentals there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so your current work in film producing and in the hospitality business, can you kind of name a couple of the companies? I know one of them is Offhand Co.
Yes, that's the film production company,
Yes.
which was birthed in 2020. And then my current guest house is called Villa Naguabo, or in Spanish they say Villa Naguabo, and it's in Naguabo.
Yeah, and do you own it? You co-own it?
I do own it. No, I'm the sole owner of that. Of this one, yeah.
Amazing. Girl boss. All right. So with these two ventures and pillars of your creative exploits and professional exploits, are there any specific goals that you are trying to accomplish with these exploits?
Most certainly. Funnily enough, even though I started the guest house business first, I do see the guest house business long term being something that supports my more artistic career. Not that I don't consider this house and this project artistic, it definitely is. Um, However, eventually I will reach a place where the house doesn't need so much attention and it will just be running itself more smoothly, and I'll have more time and, quite frankly, money to just invest more in film and theater.
Amazing. So one feeds the other, right?
Yes.
Amazing. And you love both of them. Uh, so
100%.
that's incredible. And just really quick, I want to ask you about something you just said. In terms of creativity, how is working as an owner of a hospitality business creative for you? How does that
Yeah.
tickle the creative urge?
So, the house I bought was a fixer-upper. It wasn't, every little nail tapped in perfect kind of property. Of course, I purchased the property in 2019 when I was 24, and it was just a shell of a house. There were, it's two main apartments, and neither of them had a kitchen. Um, One apartment didn't have any walls, and it came fully unfurnished, and there was water issues. Both roofs leaked. Electrical issues, and the whole house, like, paint was just dripping from the ceilings, and it was dirty and hadn't been lived in for a while. And so what's good about having a fixer upper is, as you fix it up, you get to put your own ideas and flair into the home. So in that way, I sort of got to design this home as I was building it. And so I've done things like, put in arches into a wall that wasn't there, or pick my paint colors, pick all my furniture, choose how big rooms are going to be because I decide where the walls go, things like that. And then finally, upstairs is essentially finished. Downstairs, where I am, I'm still working on. But upstairs, once all the foundational elements were finished, then you start to, like, actually get to put yourself into it also in a new way. For example, after big storms here, a lot of debris washes up onto the beaches, such as broken tile or glass. And of course, we're always finding little things like shells or fossils and random artifacts. And so for a few years, I collected those things from the beach, and I've been mosaicing borders around my doors and windows and walls upstairs little by little. And that's been really rewarding because it's just like, wow, pieces of Puerto Rico from all over are in the space.
Yeah. I can tell you've put a lot of time, attention, and spirit and heart into this, and I'm I'm sure it means the world to have your hands in this kind of project. Did you ever see yourself as kind of an interior designer, if you will, or like, are you really into DIY? Were you into DIY before this? Or
I actually never thought of this until you just asked this in this way. But when I was little, my grandma used to have a kind of a card stock company for medical cards for doctors, and eventually she retired, but she had boxes of these cards left over, and I would cut them up and make these little fairy houses, and then like make little tiny little furniture for the fairies to hang out in. So maybe something from there was seeded and planted.
that is the cutest thing ever. I have also been targeted with ads on Instagram about little tiny fairy houses, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're
That
getting really advanced these days. I need to step it up.
miniatures are a whole other world, literally. That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that with me and with our listeners. Um, Amazing. So let's dive in a little deeper into kind of how you got started with these two ventures, right? So we'll focus on one at a time. For film, as a producer, how did you get started? Like, what resources did you need? What people did you rely on? Like, who did you rely on? If you want to do any shout outs, feel free. Like, this is the time. Like, who were the bread and potatoes, the meat and potatoes, bread and butter of you starting and actually getting your feet under you?
Great question. Um, my partner in crime with the film venture is one of my best friends in the world. We went to high school together. Her name is May Horak, incredibly talented human being, creative. I call her a creative genius, and I mean it. And I have a lot of ideas, and I'm constantly sharing those ideas with friends, being like, we should make something, we should make a play or make something. And a lot of people are like, yeah, let's do it. And then I'm like, okay, let's set up weekly meetings. And then they're like, oh, we don't need to meet every week or whatever. Oh, like, I'll be free next month, I'll get back to you. And it just doesn't happen. But May was the first person who was like, yeah, let's do it. And she meant it as well. And we have not stopped since that conversation. I was really touched actually because she had initially reached out to me. She went to school at Mass Art for fashion and costume design and construction, and she's an incredible designer and sewer. And she had originally reached out to me asking if I would do photo shoots with her modeling her clothes. And I couldn't believe that she asked me that, but I said, of course. And so we had been doing that together already for a couple of years. And we made a couple photo books and albums of her collections. And then COVID happened, and we would talk frequently online because I was in Puerto Rico and she was in Massachusetts. And we were just like, we are going to start this film company. Neither of us knew anything about film. I have zero education in the film industry, zero formal education. And so, but we had our hearts set on it, really is why that came to be. And we just started stumbling through the dark until we found some kind of light, really, to put it sort of cheesily. Um, so we just started backwards. You know, we bought some equipment and we made a website, and then we're like, okay, next time I see you, we're gonna make something. And then we did, and we made something, and it was a big learning curve. Basically, I consider the first few films I made as my film education, and that's something that I think maybe the listeners would appreciate to hear is, even if you don't have a formal education such as college or trade school or something, um, experience is education, and some might say the best kind of education. And so all of my knowledge from film is exclusively through experience and a little bit of research. But honestly, I didn't research much, because I think you can get too in your head about it. And when it comes to creative stuff, you just got to do and just got to make. And so, and May is a doer, and she is the fire in my life. She keeps me going. We keep each other going. We're in constant contact, because you have to be if you want to continually keep the workflow going.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. And I completely agree with you. Mistakes are not failures, they're learning opportunities, right? And the only way that you're going to learn more about how to do something is by doing it and failing or making mistakes and learning what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like, what you prefer and what you don't prefer in your own work, as far as like your style goes or what you want to put out into the world. And you're like, I tried that. That didn't really feel like me. Okay, well, what does feel like me? You know, it sparks questions, curiosity, right? So I definitely agree with you and would love to hear more about that as we go through. Um, so switching gears over to the hospitality side,
Mm-hmm.
how did you get started with that? What resources did you need? What people did you rely on to get that up and going?
Yeah. So the real estate works a little differently in Puerto Rico. The laws aren't quite so strict or rigid or complicated. It's very simple. So the first property I purchased here was a rent to own contract. So it was just sale by owner. Made an agreement with the owner, put a small down payment on, and just made monthly payments and until the property was purchased. And that took, one lawyer. You don't not the buyer and the seller both have to have lawyers in Puerto Rico. You can use the same lawyer. It's very streamlined. A lot of other things about Puerto Rico are very complicated, but that is a nice simplified quality to Puerto Rico that I really appreciate, because in my mind, it could be that simple. If you have an agreement, then you have an agreement, and so that was great. That's how I got started with that one, and then um, used some money from the sale of that house to purchase the house I currently have, as well as having some support from my parents to then help me get certain things like the electrical and the water and the leaky roofs in order. And some of that support, and a lot of that support, was them coming down here and physically helping me do the work. My father is an incredibly knowledgeable person and skilled builder, and he came down here a lot, and we spent a lot of quality time in the dark getting the house in gear.
Yeah, my dad is also a painter, carpenter, handy guy. He's fixed my car more times than I can count. Um, and
Oh, we love to see
yeah,
it.
yeah, I envy you that you've gotten to do some amazing projects with your dad. That's something really, really special, and it's something that I wish I had more of, and that hopefully in the future, maybe my dad and I can do a project together. So you've just planted a seed. You've planted a little reminder for me to get down to see him more often. Um, but yeah, that's so special that you had your parents to support you through that. And I mean, not to negate like all the hard work that you've done yourself, like our parents lift us up or our support systems lift us up. And that just goes to show again, like being a self-starter doesn't mean that you do it by yourself, right? It means that you have the thought and the inclination to reach out to people who can support you to accomplish your goals, and you're resourceful, right? So thank you for that. And kind of piggybacking off of that, once you got started and you got some experience doing the film and hospitality and the businesses are going, what's something that, when life gets you down with how life goes, what's something that you kind of remind yourself that you're proud of, right? Something that you come back to that you're like, you know what? Things might be hard right now, but I did really well at this. Like I accomplished this thing and this thing keeps me going.
Wow, that's a great question. Well, with both of these ventures, there are products that you can look at and compare to each other. In film, I look at my first film and my most recent film, and that is just a clear-cut example of growth and how, my first film had a budget of $20 and my most recent project was in the 30 to 40,000 range. So that happened in an amount of time that I'm personally proud of considering my lack of experience. But it's still difficult, it's hard to remember and having to constantly remind yourself like, no, we have come so far, because it can just feel like all you can see is what is more to do. But it is really important in those moments of life and having maybe a harder time than other moments to take deep breaths and think, where were we 5 years ago? What were we doing? What don't we have that we have now? And also, how have what I like to think about a lot that's helpful is just how I have personally grown as a human being and an individual and a friend and a family member, because these things that are such a big part of my life have contributed to my personal growth. And that is something that I'm really, really proud of.
Awesome. Then feel free to kind of generalize this if you want. You don't have to go into specifics. Can you speak a little bit more towards how these ventures have helped you grow personally?
Absolutely. So, I mean, with both of these ventures, you have to be capable of finishing a project from start to finish. And that's something that I wasn't as good at before. So, especially with film, which if you talk to filmmakers, they are constantly joking about how many projects go unfinished and how many projects take 10 times the amount of time you would like it to take to finish. But it's a matter of not giving up and staying patient and actually finishing something so that you can put it out there, even if it's not perfect, but having a finish in sight, because you can always change that color correction a little bit more or lower that sound effect just a half a decibel and maybe it'll blend a little more into the background how you want it to. However, perfectionism is the death of an artist, and you have to finish, and you have to push yourself to finish, and you also have to accept like no, I need to move on from this. It can be finished. So learning that in filmmaking for me was huge because I can be a little perfectionism me, and it's embarrassing to think like, oh, I've poured my heart and soul into this artistic piece, and I'm gonna show it to people, and they're gonna judge me about it, and they're not gonna know that my sound guy canceled at 8 a.m. the morning of the first day of the shoot, and they're not gonna know that the props fell apart and then we had to spend an hour doing that or whatever. But I know that that happened, and despite all that, you have to be proud of your work, even if maybe people don't fully understand what you've gone through to get there.
Very well said. I have nothing to add to that. You literally hit everything. That's amazing. And yeah, so you have to be proud of the progress that you made. And I think that you were saying that it can be hard to remember sometimes, right? It can be hard to remember those wins, those moments of like, yes, I got it, or like, yes, this is working, right? And we were talking about this a little bit before we jumped on about like process over product, right? And I do see a trend of people documenting their process more and sharing that with folks. And I know that there's sometimes a tendency to like keep that process close to our hearts, which there's time and place for that too. But I do see a lot of value in kind of for yourself, even if you don't share it with other people, like documenting that process so you can literally go back and see a record of like where you were at this point and where you are now, and the wins that you've had and the lessons that you've learned and how it all contributes to the work that you're doing now and how you go about doing that work. So thank you very much for that. And kind of on the flip side of it, you were naturally heading that way, I think. Is there anything that actually, yes, this is where you're heading. So one mistake, one pitfall. One mistake, one pitfall that has happened both with film and with your hospitality venture, because I want to hear about both, because I really want to make sure we see both like the creative side and also the entrepreneurial side of things. So one mistake, one pitfall from both of those ventures. Tell us a little bit about what happened, how did you handle it, and what did you learn?
Wow, picking one is difficult because I face pitfalls constantly. Homeownership is not easy, especially when you own a fixer-upper, and especially when that fixer-upper is in Puerto Rico. And, just today I had a hot water heater start leaking. I lost a piece on my weed whacker, and it's just those little things add up, and you're like, wow, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And then you're like, that's crazy. This life is beautiful, and I'm so grateful, but it is constantly challenging. If I had to pick one pitfall in Puerto Rico, I mean, the weather is just constantly fighting you. The sun eats away at everything. The rain is relentless, and I live near the ocean, so the salt corrodes all of my tools and my car. It's just really testing you and wearing on you. But at the end of the day, when I look around me, it's just, in my opinion, the most beautiful place in the entire world, and makes me feel so myself when I'm breathing here, that it is just so worth it. And then with film, I mean, film is expensive to do. It's an expensive art form. So it can feel daunting to know that you have these great ideas but then be like, I'm never going to be able to do that in the way I want to because the money's not there. Or, I can't afford to hire my dream team. However, what I get out of that is being able to utilize a skill that I personally think I have a strong skill of thinking outside the box in a resourceful way and being more crafty. And then, it's sort of that saying, limitations breed creativity. And so I'm like, I did that for $5, or I made that myself, or I collected trash for 3 months and put it in my car so that I could have this one scene for 2 minutes with a bunch of trash in it. But it's like it is so rewarding in its own way because you feel capable of doing things also at the same time.
Yeah. So taking an attitude of gratitude and an outside the box approach to adversity. That's awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. And so talking a little bit more about kind of the day to day, right? We're going to talk a little bit about the day to day, about the nitty gritty. Is there anything that you want to change? Specifically about like the business, the lifestyle, the workflow, efficiency, work-life balance. So, yeah, is there anything you'd like to change? And if so, what do you think it would take to make that change?
Mm-hmm. Well, my work-life balance is all over the place. Sometimes, when I have a film project in the works, um, I will work just nonstop because it has to get done. And then when a film shoot is happening, sometimes you're working 12 to 14-hour days. And then when you're the producer and set is done, but things for the next day aren't quite all wrapped up perfectly, you have to keep working and you sleep very little. And that's not super healthy. However, it is worth it because the film shoots don't last forever. And there's not really anything to be done about that, but I'm really not complaining. I like it. It's almost like a high when you're on a project like that and you're just working so hard. But that really means that after the fact, you have to allow yourself to rest. So I think it took me a solid month of doing so little after my last shoot to actually start feeling like I could work again because work in the capacity that I want to be working because it is so draining, but you can't be upset with yourself for that. It's necessary and it's required for your health and well-being. And then for the house in Puerto Rico, I've had the house for, it'll be 6 years this coming April. And I have come so far with the house, and I'm getting to a place where it won't require so much of my attention because right now I am constantly coming back to Puerto Rico to check on things and make the next step in terms of the construction and things like that. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Once a few more things are wrapped up, the house won't need me so much. And that is going to help my work-life balance a lot because I can actually just enjoy this thing that I've been working on for half a decade. Um, so a lot of my close a lot of people close to me are, call me a workaholic or say I always have so much going on or, say like I'm the epitome of work hard, play hard type person. But I do get tired. I'm tired all the time. And I love working though. So it's hard to force myself to take it easy sometimes. but I have a lot of practice. So luckily I've spent years working on making sure I'm resting enough.
Definitely, it does take practice to make sure that you rest for sure. Rest is productive, right? Rest is productive. Um,
I
and
like to
you're,
think of rest as like an actual piece of achieving my goal, because without it, you will fall behind schedule, because you will get to a place where you can't keep up
yeah,
with what you want to do. So if I think of it in that way, I'm like, oh no, this is another investment towards my goal. That really helps me.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And we do have quite a bit more time left. I want to hear a little bit more um, about sustainability. So you were talking about making sure getting the house to a point where it won't need you as much, right? Can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit more about what needs to happen for that to be sustainable? And then like kind of a little bit more on the film side too, like what needs to happen for the film ventures to continue at a pace that you want them to continue.
Mhm. So for the house, there's a very concrete answer for that. It's a little joke I just made for myself. Because um, my house is built on a very steep hill. I consider the hill like an amenity to the experience of being here because it's shockingly steep. And so it's built like a staircase. And so the top apartment is one stair and the bottom apartment is another stair. And the top apartment has a wooden roof on it. And wood does not do well in Puerto Rico. So the roof leaks. And the roof design is also utterly nonsensical and poorly designed. So it leaks badly sometimes. So I will come here and then I will fix the leaks, fix quote unquote, and then Puerto Rico will throw some sun and throw some rain at my fixes and they will deteriorate, and then I have to fix the roof again so that water is not pouring into the into the apartment. Um, so soon I have just hired a contractor. Luckily, this has been in the works for a long time. I've been spent the last couple years trying to make a decision about what I'm going to do about this roof situation. There was a talk. I was thinking for a while of just changing the design of the roof so that those issues would be less so, and then or leaving the design and covering it in metal, or changing the design and covering it in metal, and then thinking, okay, well, what are my best options in terms of optimizing space versus cost? However, I actually recently made, about a month ago, the decision to scrap all of that and we're going to rip the roof off of the house and make it concrete. And that decision actually took me years to make. So, um, even if you think someone's moving really fast, definitely in my mind, oftentimes there's parts of me that are moving very slowly. And that actually is a blessing, because I think I would have really regretted putting metal on the roof, because, what I had to come to terms with, and since I'm an outsider here and have to learn about the place and learn about the way things are done, and then furthermore why things are done the way they are done, which aren't maybe so evident right at first. I have learned that the absolute best option in terms of investment for value of the property is to do this really dramatic change, which seems super scary, and just make the roof concrete. It's Puerto Rico. You have to make buildings out of concrete if you want them to last. So that is what's going to happen. And I am so glad that the decision has been made, and things in Puerto Rico take a very long time, minimum twice as long as you think they might in the States. So, but at least the process has started, and it will definitely be finished within the year. I'm really excited about that.
That is extremely exciting. Oh my goodness, to have a literal roof over your head that doesn't leak on you.
Yep.
That's huge. That's huge. And for film, how do you see your film ventures becoming a little more sustainable for you? If you do, I mean, if this is something that is kind of like you have a specific project in mind and then you're like, okay, I'll take a break from it, that's totally fine too. But if it is something that you're envisioning carrying on with and feeding continuously and seeing where it goes, talk to me a little bit more about that. Where do you want to go with it? How do you want to make it sustainable?
So since I graduated college, there have been chunks of time where I haven't been in Puerto Rico, and I've been sustaining myself financially through art and primarily acting and producing. And I found myself in those periods, especially 2 years ago, where I was just taking gigs because that was how I was making my living. And it wasn't because I wanted to work on the project necessarily. I mean, I wasn't doing things that weren't aligned with my beliefs and things like that, but I did find myself, working, for example, working for the same company multiple times, or other example, taking jobs wherever I would get them. So 2 years ago, in that year, I moved 7 times. And part of me was grateful because I was like, wow, I'm acting full time right now, and that is how I'm making money. And that's a goal that I had for myself that I achieved. However, once I found myself in that place, I was like, this is this isn't actually, I think, the lifestyle that I want to be doing for the next 20 years. This is too much. I'm exhausted. I have no sense of stability or home base. And so I also relatively recently decided that I am going to stick to filmmaking and acting unless there's some exceptional exception, which of course there always could be, in Western Massachusetts, or at least Massachusetts, but really trying to focus in Western Massachusetts, where I'm from, and where there are so many beautiful creative people. And I'm really excited about this one. My recently released film called Backcountry was just in a film festival in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and I got to be there and network with so many great local film people, and we already have projects lined up together. Um, and multiple projects lined up together. And that was exactly what I was hoping from that. And I'm just really looking forward to this next chapter of my life where basically I'm narrowing my focus and being a little bit more intentional about location specifically. And and I don't think that's the only way, but that's what I've tried other ways, and this is the way I'm going to try next, and I just have a really good feeling about it.
That's extremely exciting that you've participated in a film festival already, and that's huge. That's huge steps. When did you say you started producing? This was
Uh, I just during COVID in 2020, I just May and I,
yeah,
sort of for fun, but also very seriously, were like, let's just make movies.
yeah. So that was
And
4 years. Four
that's
years
for
later.
years. Yeah.
4 years later, and you have a piece in a festival. And if you don't mind me asking, what was the name of the festival? What was the name of the piece? How did you do?
Sure. So the first festival we were accepted to was Amazing Fantasy Fest in Buffalo, New York, and we were nominated for Best Short Film there, which was unexpected and really heartwarming to see so immediately your hard work being acknowledged. And that was the first. I really so the name of the film is Backcountry. It is inspired by the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. And May wrote the script, and I edited it, and I produced it, and May starred in it, and she did a fantastic job. And I really consider that to be my first film. We have made other films since then that are still in post or unreleased and will be released eventually. But this was really my first one I put out there as like, okay, I'm now arriving to the film community as a filmmaker and submitting to festivals, and we were accepted first into Amazing Fantasy Fest, which was great, got the nomination, and then luckily accepted into the Lava Film Festival in Greenfield at the Lava Center, which is a beautiful art center and community center right on Main Street in downtown Greenfield, and just had a really, really, really rewarding experience in terms of making connections with local filmmakers to the Pioneer Valley.
So, thank you for elaborating on that. And I realized I haven't asked this yet. For those of our listeners who have heard the term producer in film, but don't really know what a producer does, can you just quickly define in one or two sentences the main responsibilities of a producer?
Sure. So there are different kinds of producers, and depending on the size of the project, you might have multiple kinds of producers on the same project. But if you are just speaking very generally, a producer is in charge of managing the budget and in charge of managing basically every department and working closely alongside with the heads of the other departments and the team, and doing the hiring and making the financial decisions, or actually raising the funds or accruing the funds to make the project happen. But that isn't only what a producer does. They're often helping heads of departments problem solve and organize and really just making it happen.
Yeah, that was an excellent short description of what a producer is and does. Thank you. And so we're coming into the last 11 minutes of our show here, and we have two more points to touch on. The second to last point is advice. For any of our listeners who are curious about doing what you do as a film producer, as a business owner, what advice do you have for them? It can be super specific, it could be broad, but in 5 or less minutes, if you can give a little advice to our listeners.
In 5 or less words.
Sure.
Wow. Okay.
Oh no, minutes. 5 or less minutes.
Oh, 5 or less minutes.
I mean, you could go for the 5 or less words. That's a great way to start off.
I don't know about the 5 or less words, but I can definitely keep it concise. I think to circle back on a couple of things that we've already touched on, number one is, for me, it is not just about the things you are accomplishing, but how you are growing as a human being and as a spirit throughout that journey. And it helps me so much to stay focused on that and focus on who I am and what kind of person I want to be to others, and how and And so don't lose sight of who you are just because you're trying to achieve certain goals, because it will get in your way. And the other part of that being is, it is supposed to, it's not supposed to be hard sometimes, but it is impossible for it to never be hard, because that is just the nature of how life works. So when it is hard, it's also helpful for me to remember it's supposed to be hard, so that when it's really good, it's also supposed to be really good. And I'm not psyching myself out or thinking I don't deserve it. It's like, no, you go through those hard things and it makes that payoff that much sweeter.
Well, thank you. And I noticed you were thinking a little bit about don't let yourself get in your own way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Right. So, I mean, I have had the thought of, quote unquote, quitting or giving up or thinking I'm not going to make it, hundreds of times. And I think a big part of why I haven't given up, quote unquote, is that living the way that I'm living seems to be a fundamental part of who I am on the inside. I think about how it would be so wonderful even to just, get a job at McDonald's. And I'm not even kidding. I said, that's it. I'm submitting the McDonald's application. I just need consistent income, or I just need a set schedule, or I just need a reason to stay in one place, or something like that. But when it comes down to it, I know that living this way is, despite its challenges and immense difficulties, it is the way I want to be living my life. And so I really believe that human beings are very powerful spiritual creatures. And if you are adamant about living a certain way, it might not be exactly tied into a neat little bow the way that you want it to be, but it is possible. And I know that if I had a computer job, for example, I just wouldn't be being myself. And that isn't healthy. So, and, sometimes life is really complicated or just so overwhelming and difficult that, you know, you just need to do what you got to do in certain circumstances. But I do think there's a lot to be said for just absolute un
Compromising?
uncompromised willpower. Yeah.
Um, Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm sure our listeners appreciate the advice as well. And lastly, if you would like to speak about any upcoming projects or announcements that you have, any pitches that you want to make, now is the time. The floor is yours. Um, Shameless pitches are entirely welcome. Lay it
Okay.
on us.
Well, anyone and everyone, I implore you to visit Puerto Rico. It is an incredible place. I think almost almost anyone I talk to who comes to this place for the first time is like, this is different than I thought. Like, it just feels different than I thought it was going to be. And they call it, the island of enchantment for a reason. It really just draws your heart in a way that I haven't experienced before, and I get so much out of it. So if it's not at my house, which everyone is welcome to, then just coming to Puerto Rico in general is it is valuable. And then for film shameless plugs, I'm very excited that next year I'm going to produce my first feature film. I co-produced a feature film in Texas a couple of years ago at this point with some amazing filmmakers there. But this is going to be the first feature film that I will produce solely on my own, however, in tandem with my creative partner, May. And so we'll be shooting in the spring. There's so much work to do. It's anyone would like to hear more about that, feel free to reach out. And then I'll be releasing projects that have been made also. One will be coming out very soon. I'm going to release information about what's going to be released this Friday. It's a very silly, satirical little thing, just utter comedy. I'm excited for folks to get to see that. And then we'll have other shorts coming out. I'll have a premiere of a TV pilot I co-produced and starred in, premiering in New York City in January. That's called Not Just Friends, a very meaningful project to me. It draws on things from my personal life, and I made it with people who are very special to me as well. So definitely stay tuned for that. And there's just going to be more to come as well. It does look like I will be continuing down these paths that I have set for myself. So I feel very grateful again, and just very lucky that I am in the position to say that.
Thank you. And we're very lucky to have you on the show. And just really quick again, let's name drop the house that you have in Puerto Rico.
Yes, it's Villa Naguabo.
Villa Naguabo. And how can folks get in touch with you if they have questions about, let's start with questions about film producing, or if they want to connect with you on a project, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, great. Offhand Co has a website. You can contact us there. There's links to our socials. There's links to my personal socials on there. It's just offhandco.com. And for I'm always open to questions and always open to talking to people who are interested in filmmaking. And then for Villa Naguabo, we're on Airbnb and other websites. We have a Facebook page, and the email is just villa.naguabo@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you very much. And again, from the bottom of my heart, it is an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I hope we get to catch up again soon. And thank you, everybody, for listening in and joining us today. You can look forward to the episode being posted on YouTube and hopefully Spotify as well in the near future. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you so much, Duck.
night.
This was great.
Thank you, Lena.